Hey, thank you for joining us today here at the Real Tennessee Titans blog. Most of you guys don't know me, but you've read my blog, you've seen my Facebook page. I'm Alex Votingheimer, the founder of the Real Titans blog, the official, unofficial Titans blog for diehard fans. Today we have a very special guest from Oregon, Brett Field. He's a season ticket holder for the Ducks. He's seen every game Mariota's ever played since his freshman year, and we're really glad to have him on the show today. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Brett Field. Good to see you again, Brett. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Got a beer for you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Coors Light, beer champions.
So, as a Titans fan and as the blogger for the Titans, you understand that I've been pro Mettenberger since the draft. My counterpart over here was telling me I was crazy the entire time. Now, in my blog posts, you guys have seen, Mettenberger has this arm, Mettenberger plays this style, and that's what I've liked in a quarterback. But, as I've said all along, I'm a Titans fan. I'm going to get behind our quarterback. And so today I'm bringing on the show a guy who knows Mariota better than anyone as a fan. And he's going to share his opening thoughts. And I just want to know, Brett, tell me about your experience as a season ticket holder, Duck fan, and with Mariota.
I mean, it's really just been an incredible ride the last 3 years for Oregon fans. 3 years, 5 losses only, national championship game appearance, 2 number 2 finishes. Obviously couldn't quite get that national championship, came close a couple times. But just watching Marcus Mariota play is a real treat. This guy can really do it all with the legs, with the arm, most importantly with the mind, and is willing to put in that work off the field as well as in the classroom in college and in the huddle. And it's a guy that really commanded the respect of fans, coaches, players, you name it. Can't say enough about it.
And that's one thing that I like to bring up. In the classroom, I think we all can agree that Mariota is a supreme talent. He's a very educated guy. Wissenhut went so far to say that he has a photographic memory, which, if you have photographic memory in the NFL, that's going to be valuable to say the least. One thing I want to talk about Mariota, and this is probably my bias, but I traditionally don't like the quiet leader. That's one thing I liked about Mettenberger, Tom Brady, these guys that are loud and vocal, and they're angry and feisty. And I want to know how, in the first year as a rookie, how does Mariota take the locker room as the leader from a more soft-spoken approach?
And I think that's going to be the challenge for him. And that was something that certainly the coaches at Oregon always were talking about, kind of being the area he could improve in, especially his freshman and sophomore seasons. Then his junior season last year, he took big strides, captain of the team, really kind of put the team on his back, had more of that vocal leadership. But he's not going to be the Tom Brady guy. He's not going to be the guy that's running around yelling at his teammates, firing everyone up in that way. I think he can lead in a different way. And I think one of the great comparisons to him is Joe Montana. I'm also a San Francisco 49ers fan, so obviously I love the guy. He was another guy who was kind of a quiet, confident leader, led more by example necessarily than leading everyone around firing up. But the type of guy who, if you have that confidence as well as if you have that dedication, which we're talking about Marcus Mariota in the classroom, I think that's really important. A lot of people say, what is the classroom transfer over the NFL? You're not taking tests or reading books, and that's true. But I think it shows the type of dedication you can bring when you go from college, where they're not on the practice field nearly as long or in the film room nearly as long as the NFL. And I think he's going to be able, between that work ethic and that confidence, and then just his abilities as a football player, be that kind of guy that leads by example and leads in that kind of different way. And I think that can be just as successful as the loud, outspoken leader.
I think that's a good point. We have seen guys do that in the NFL, be the soft-spoken leader. And, I think everyone here would agree that if Mariota is the next Super Bowl champion, we'd all love that. Here's an honest question. This is an informal show. Mm-hmm. Do you think Marcus Mariota's career would have been better if he was drafted by the Eagles?
I think it's tough to say it wouldn't. But it's also just impossible to project that, because obviously if he had gone to Chip Kelly, coached him his freshman year, and they played in the same system for 2 years under Mark Helfrich, who was a Chip Kelly disciple, and also certainly look at Philly, they have more offensive weapons than Tennessee. So I think most quarterbacks would be better in that situation. But does that mean that he can't succeed in Tennessee? Absolutely not. And I think that it's exciting, and I think it's also a chance for Marcus in his career to prove that he's not just a Chip Kelly product, that he can go out and be in a different system. And I think in that way it could almost be the best thing for his career if he does succeed.
Yeah, good point to bring up that if Mariota can succeed in this Wissenhut pro style offense, then I guess he's as talented as any quarterback ever. There were projections of Jameis Winston being a better fit for Tennessee, or the fact that Mettenberger was the fit for Tennessee because of how the offense was built now. We talked about this a lot. They drafted Darrell Green Beckham, he's a big wide receiver. He's an outside guy. They have Justin Hunter, who's a big wide receiver. He's an outside guy. They actually drafted a fullback in the 4th round, which we've made jokes about this a lot. I don't think Mariota's ever seen a fullback.
I don't think anyone west of the Mississippi has seen a fullback in the last 30 years, actually.
Yeah, and speaking of our fullback, he's from Alabama. So we got that. We got a big offensive line. We got another big running back, David Cobb, out of Minnesota. I mean, it looks to me like a traditional Ken was in a 3-5-7 step drop under center offense. Now, that's not to say that he's not going to put in the wrinkle of Mariota. My question is, how much does Wisenhunt have to change his offense to bring up the learning curve for Mariota, or does Mariota throw into the fire and then situationally they let Mariota do some things like in the spread or outside the pocket?
I think there's been this focus in the NFL, especially with quarterbacks, on type that I think is a little bit misguided, both with offenses and quarterbacks. I think that everyone tries to obsess, and it happens in college football too. I watch a lot of college football, huge Oregon fan, huge Pac-12 fan, and everyone wants to obsess. Is this a pro-style offense? Is this a West Coast offense? Is this a spread offense? Is it a spread option offense? And really, the best offenses, and especially even more so in the NFL than in the NCAA, because you really have to do this because the opposing defensive coordinators are so good. The best offenses have to take from a lot of different aspects. You look at a team like the Indianapolis Colts. They have Andrew Luck. Is Andrew Luck a pro-style quarterback? Sure, you could say that. But he's also one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL. If you watch the Colts, they run some spread. They'll spread the ball out. They'll even run zone read. Like I said, I'm a San Francisco 49ers fan as well. That's a team. They're coached by Jim Harbaugh, the classic Stanford ground and pound offense. They have Colin Kaepernick, a guy who runs a lot, and they go from the shotgun a lot, and they run a lot of spread options. So I don't think you necessarily have to put an offense in this label of pro style or spread. And I also think the same with the quarterback. You brought up Jameis Winston versus Marcus Mariota. Obviously, the Titans didn't have to make that choice because the Buccaneers made it for them. But I think that it's easy to say, oh, this guy's a pro style quarterback. This guy is a spread quarterback. I think if Marcus Mariota had gone to college at Stanford, at USC, at Alabama, you'd be talking about him as a pro style quarterback because that's the system he would have come up in there. And if you watch him play, obviously he's taking the snap from the shotgun, which I guess is going to be the biggest obstacle for him is just getting under center. He, like a lot of quarterbacks these days, has never taken the snap under center in a competitive situation. I think that's probably the biggest challenge for him. But if you watched Oregon play last year, in the last 3 years actually, you saw him more so than any of our other quarterbacks staying in the pocket. And after that snap, it kind of looks like a traditional pro style play. So I think just trying to put offenses and quarterbacks in types doesn't necessarily work, especially in the NFL, where I think any good team has to incorporate aspects of all different types of offense.
And to that point, I do agree that it's probably unfair. I mean, one criticism of Marcus Mariota is that he's always throwing to wide open players. And I mean, how can that be a criticism of a guy when the offense is that good? I will confess I'm an Oregon State Beavers fan. So I do have my Duck hatred, but I'm putting that aside for the pro game. And I've seen the Ducks, first read, Mariota throws to the slant, first read throws to the bubble screen, and things like that. And I believe that Wisenhunt has to have that early on in Mariota's career to get him confident, to take that ball under center, to step back and make the full field read and throw it. So, I mean, we're take a little pause here, making sure, not cutting Brett off, making sure you guys are tweeting your questions, commenting on the side here. We're going to get through, another few questions with Brett, and then we're going to go down and listen to the fan comments. I've seen my phone light up a couple times with some tweets, so just want to make sure you guys are aware that you can comment on the side. I don't know what side it is. You can comment on the side, and we will get to those questions afterward. All right, going back into the nitty-gritty. Amateur Scout Brett here. I want to know, this blog wasn't meant to be a mainstream blog. I was tired of the same ESPN article about the same thing over again, so I don't even write about the common stuff. What in Mariota's game, what talent does he have that they're not talking about on ESPN? They're not talking about his accuracy or his speed. What's that one thing that you saw in person that you could say, I think this is an underrated part of Mariota's game that no one's talking about?
I think I'm going to give you two. On the physical side, I think
perfect.
I think his best skill, obviously, very accurate passer, very fast, incredibly fast. Probably the fastest quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
certainly with RG3's knee situation, I think RG3 has healthy, good challenge. He's the only one in the NFL. But I think his best skill, if you watched him, was just his ability to stay up in the pocket. And he almost reminds me of a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, a guy who has the ability to, when there's pressure, just stay up, just not go down, just kind of move his feet. And there's so many times over the course of the season, you think the guy is sacked, a couple guys on him, and he just ducks out of the pile and is able to find an open receiver. And to go along with that, he's also a guy that, and a lot of college quarterbacks, you don't see this. When he does get out of the pocket and scramble, he keeps his eyes down the field. And I think it's going to be huge for him in the NFL. Because as an Oregon fan last season, you're watching so many times he scrambles, and you say, oh, take the 5-yard run, maybe even a 10-yard run. And he'll stop right in front of the line of scrimmage, throw to an open guy 30 yards down the field. And I think that's where a lot of the running quarterbacks have issues moving to the NFL is those 5 to 10-yard runs are 2 to 3-yard runs because you have much faster linebackers and safeties and defensive ends. And I think that's really going to help him in the NFL is the fact that he does know how to keep his eyes downfield already. He's not going to have to learn that. And I think on the mental side of the game, something that not a lot of people talk about is just he's the type of guy that he can go out there and obviously he didn't throw many interceptions, so you can't necessarily talk about how he bounces back after interception. He can go out there and maybe miss a pass or have a bad series, and you couldn't tell the next series. And I think for a 21-year-old kid, 22-year-old kid, you don't see that very often, and especially these very talented athletes. A lot of times, you see guys. I think Johnny Manziel for Cleveland is the classic example of that. Ton of talent, but when things don't go well, they hang their head. They don't come out the same way for the next series. He's a guy you couldn't tell whether he just threw a brilliant touchdown pass the last series or if he just threw a pick six because he just is that super even keeled. I think that's really another thing that's really going to help him, especially on a team like Tennessee, where let's be honest, there's going to be some growing pains. It's not a team that's probably going to win 12 games next year, and so he'll be good at adjusting at that.
And he sells jerseys. I mean,
absolutely.
The number. I mean, I can't believe this myself. I mean, if you told me if we took Mariota, we were going to sell the most jerseys in the league since the draft, I'd be like, well, I mean, it's hard for management to turn that down.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think that I guess you can see some. I think Mariota is a superior passer to Russell Wilson, but the escapability factor maybe you can compare it to Ben Roethlisberger, Russell Wilson, and I think that is something that could translate. And I mean, Kevin Wisenhunt coached Ben Roethlisberger.
Yes, absolutely.
And Ken Wisenhunt had Hines Ward, and he had our boy Nate Washington, and he had these guys that could move after the play broke down and knew Ben was going to move. So I think that's also a transition that Sean Jefferson, the wide receiver coach, is going to have to teach. Is like in a Mettenberger offense, the ball's going to be on time, and it's if he has to scramble, he's going to throw it away. Mm-hmm. Another dynamic that Mariota can bring is being able to not have to throw it away. Now, I think the key for him being a quarterback is to know when to throw it away out there. Yeah, which is going to be different than pros, but I think that he's a smart kid, and I think we can do something with that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to let off Brett here easy. You've heard, and you can tell me if you think they're true, but they probably were true. I heard Fletcher Cox, Brandon Boykin, 2 first-round picks, and a potential draft pick starter for Mariota after the Titans took Mariota. If that offer's on the table as a GM, and even if you're in love with Mariota, can you give up that many starters immediately for a team that needs so many growing pains?
I mean, it's tough. Absolutely. It's obviously I'm the biggest Mariota fan out there, but I have to believe if that offer was on the table, the Titans had to look at that long and hard, just because, like you said, it is a team that needs a lot of players, as most teams are picking number 2 in the draft do. Yeah. And I think that there's definitely a good argument that was a good trade. That would have been a good trade for the Titans to accept. But at the other time, you brought it up with jersey sales. I think Tennessee Titans, it's a small market team. It's a team that hasn't necessarily been in the limelight the past few years. And I think as a coaching staff and as front office management, looking at the business side, that's tough to turn down a guy who's going to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated, who's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated before his 22nd birthday.
The first guy on Sports Illustrated since the '99 Super Bowl.
Exactly. He's been on the Sports Illustrated the most of anyone before their 22nd birthday, except for LeBron James, I believe. He's a guy that raises the Titans' Q rating, as well as you look at, obviously the quarterback's the most important position in the NFL, and if you do have a chance, if you do believe in the guy and you do buy into him, it is tough to turn it down, even though they could have seen a lot. So I guess it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I can see that both ways. I think I think there's really good arguments from both ends of that for the Titans. Obviously, they stuck with Mariota, which I think means they're buying into him, which is good. And we'll see how that plays out for them.
So we've talked about Mettenberger, we talked about Mariota, we talked a lot of quarterbacks today. I was really hoping the Titans won the HBO, what's the show called? The behind the scenes HBO show. Hard Knocks. They're one of the teams in the top 9 that could have won it. And one of the reasons I wanted to see it is I wanted to see how the media is going to play this Mettenberger fight to the death, give him a battle axe, give me a mace or something like that. I'm going to fight for my job. I really want to know is how big of a deal, and we can both weigh in on this, how big of a deal is the media going to make when Mariota makes a mistake and the camera shows Mettenberger on the sideline, much like you see with Tebow on the bench or Johnny Manziel? Obviously, Mettenberger is not to that level of those guys as far as stardom goes, or not stardom, but like fanfare. But I do think that's a story that we're going to see, especially in our local media in Nashville. Is there's still people that believe in Met, and much like when McNair was drafted, there were still people who wanted Neil O'Donnell to play, and eventually McNair took that by the reins and became our best player in the history of Tennessee and Houston franchise. So my thing is, I'll get your opinion and I'll tell you what I think. How much does Mariota have to not worry, but it's not Charlie Whitehurst behind him. It's a guy who wants his job. And how is the media going to reflect that in how it goes? You know the media.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the media is always playing for a story. There's the old adage, the most popular player on the team is always the backup quarterback,
yeah, exactly.
Which especially goes for when a team's losing. I think, kind of playing off the last answer I gave, you look at what they turned down. Potentially, obviously, we don't know how true that is. Yeah. But just assuming that report is true, as I think most of those media reports about trades usually end up being true and they come from reliable sources, I think the Titans are certainly bought into Mariota, and they know if they start in week 1, you can't start a guy and then bench him. You're going to ruin him.
Which that's what we agree on. We don't think he should start week 1.
Exactly. So I mean, yeah, we've had this conversation off the air actually, where my philosophy, if I was running a team, and this is how it used to be up until probably about 6-7 years ago, you draft a quarterback even at number 1, number 2 overall, I think he should sit for a season because it's such a difficult position to play, and the step up from college to pros is a big transition. And it is a position where it's not like a running back or wide receiver where you can play half the time. You're either playing or you're not. Because I also believe in that adage where if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. You have to pick a guy. Because of that, I wish, and unfortunately this just isn't how it works anymore, because so much money and branding and hype is built into these guys that go high in the draft at quarterback. So they just have to start week 1. That's just the way it is now. Like I would love to see Mettenberger start a whole season, let Mariota sit on the bench, because also at the end of the day, what are the odds that the Titans are really going to make noise? Obviously, they could. I'd love to see Mariota do well, but you have to assume, even if you're the Tennessee Titans coaches and front office, this is going to be kind of a year taking another step in the next direction, and maybe a couple years down the road, that's when this whole thing is going to work out. So I wish, Carson Palmer famously never took a single snap after he was picked number 1 by the Bengals. He ended up having a fine career, continues to have a fine career in Arizona. So I wish that's how teams operated now. But going back to your question and, kind of realizing that's just not how it works anymore, I don't think, you mentioned Manziel and Tebow. Those are guys with big Q ratings. Those are guys that won Heismans. Guys, in Tebow's case, he won a national championship. In Manziel's case, one of the highest profile athletes, even as a college quarterback. I'm just not sure Mettenberger has that Q rating, especially outside of Nashville. Obviously, I'm not that familiar with the national media market, and I'm sure in the local papers it'll be bigger. I just don't see that being something that comes up on like ESPN, unless Mariota is just really, really, really struggling. Yeah. Which obviously could happen. I don't foresee that happening.
Well, and if Mariota does struggle, every journalist is going to say, I always thought Mettenberger had talent. I always thought Mettenberger was the guy. So we're never going to know the true answer on that. On my take, I do think that had they been on Hard Knocks, it would have been played up more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially since
for the media.
Mariota's number 8, even though they took the number from Ryan Suckup. But Mettenberger's number 7. Their lockers are right next to each other. Mm-hmm. And I think they would have made that more of a story than it probably is. But
absolutely.
I also think there is something there because, I don't know what the consensus is, but I think a lot of people believe that Mettenberger does have arm talent. Now, a lot of people have arm talent. Can you convert that into actual meaningful wins and yards and touchdowns? That's to be seen. But like you said, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 0. But Hunt keeps telling us it's a good thing we have 2 guys that we believe in.
Well, and that's true, because obviously injuries are a thing that happens, as well as I'm sure Mettenberger being there and being hungry is something that's going to push Mariota. And I think that's good for any player in any position in any sport, and especially a quarterback. You don't want to get complacent. And I think having a guy to push you will help. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. I have a hard time seeing with the investment the Titans have made in Mariota, especially this season. I just think that they can't afford to bench him for a guy like Mettenberger.
Agreed. Here's an interesting thing they're not talking about very much in the mainstream media, but I've wondered, I've talked to some other people, at what point, not do the Titans consider trading? At what point does Chip Kelly offer for Mariota?
Well, it sounds like he already has. See, that's an interesting question. Obviously, as an Oregon fan, we got to enjoy Chip Kelly for 6 years, both as offensive coordinator and head coach. The man is kind of a mad scientist. I don't think you can ever quite tell what he's going to say. My guess is his pursuit of Mariota is probably over for now, for a couple years at least.
Okay.
But because if you look at Chip Kelly's philosophy, next man up was always his idea, which was he never wanted to put too much on one player. And I think Marcus Mariota was probably his favorite player he ever coached. Certainly the best player he ever coached, in my opinion, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that he really did want him in the pros. But I think he knows that, this pursuit of one player is not going to be good for the locker room. And I think he knows that as well, that he already tried once. I don't think he's going to continue to break the bank trying to get him again. And also for Chip Kelly, and this is what I'm interested in seeing, he traded for Sam Bradford, not to get too off the Titans topic, but
Go ahead.
There are so many quarterbacks that run his system, that have those skills that he's looking for in a quarterback in college that aren't necessarily getting drafted by teams because there's this kind of fear of a spread quarterback, where I think there's this kind of market inefficiency where, yes, Mariota is great. He's probably the best of those that there is now in the NFL. I don't know if there's anyone this season who's coming up that's going to be better than him, but there you can get a guy that's maybe 80% of what Mariota is in the 4th round if he really does need a quarterback, if Bradford doesn't work out. And my guess is that's where he's going to go now that he doesn't get Mariota. But again, Chip Kelly, like I said, mad scientist.
Mad scientist.
I don't think anyone, I think he's the smartest man in football. I don't think anyone knows what he's thinking.
Fair enough. I mean, I've said things like personally and privately, and probably you'll hear more about this through the year, but I can see a Chip Kelly putting an offer in and being like, whenever you're ready, Tennessee. Whenever you are done, here's the offer. Now, I mean, you're not going to hear that in the reports. I don't even know that. I've never talked to it and said that. But like you said, mad scientist. All right, I want to get into so a lot of my posts and reasoning behind, like, I was a Mettenberger guy. I still believe in Mettenberger. I mean, I'm hopeful for Mariota, and if Mettenberger can be the best quarterback he can be from where he is, that's fine with me as well. But Mettenberger on tape, what blew people away was there's a play, and I'm going to go deep into Tennessee diehardness here. There's a play in the, I believe it was the Houston Texans game, and Kendall Wright runs a backside seam. And on the seam, Mettenberger's kind of staring him down, and the safety tries to jump the route. But Mettenberger, such a strong arm, puts it, and when the safety on the Texans tries to jump, when he tries to jump, the ball is too fast and gets by. And that's one thing they point out over and over, is his arm strength. Now, what on tape? Tell me an Oregon moment. Tell me a moment in Oregon football where you said, that's the tape I'm going to show if I'm trying to get drafted.
It was about 4 a game.
I understand there's a lot, but we all can talk about different throws. But give me a Mariota moment special for you.
I think the best moment he had in his career to me was, and it's the famous moment, it's kind of a cop-out answer, was the play against Michigan State. It's 3rd and 8, Oregon's down by 11. And he, there's 3 guys have a chance at him. He ends up scrambling out. As he's falling down, as a guy's shoestring tackling him, he gets a shovel pass off to his running back, gets the first down, leads the team down to a touchdown. I think that's kind of summarizes Marcus Mariota in a nutshell, as far as a guy who keeps plays alive, can improvise, is always kind of looking for that surprise play. No one saw Royce Freeman, the running back, on that play, and all of a sudden he has the ball. He's getting a 15-yard first down. If I could pick one play from Mariota's highlight reel, it's probably that. But like I said, there's probably 3 or 4 plays a game that made you say, wow, this guy could play for anybody in the NFL.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's the main rundown I wanted to go through. So at this point, we're going to dive in. I'm going to look at my phone here.
Check the Twitter accounts. Get your questions in.
Yeah, I see the first question here. I actually wrote it down. We have one from Michael Escoto, and he says to Brett, Brett, what does Mariota's career in the NFL and in college mean for Hawaii football? I mean, I'm not talking about the team, but the state of Hawaii, the Hawaiian people.
It's huge. I mean, obviously I'm not from Hawaii, but certainly, he speaks, you saw him, I'm sure, at the draft with the Lays, and it was when he came out for a senior night, it was the same thing. He's a guy that really takes his Hawaiian heritage seriously. He's a guy who that's very important to him. And really, when was the last time there was a guy, Manti Te'o, obviously, from Notre Dame, but, there's a difference between a linebacker and he also had some weird stuff off the field that I think makes it a little bit tougher to be like, this is our guy as a state. I mean, it's a small state. It's a state that culturally is different than every state in the union by far. And he's their guy, and he embraces that. And I think the people of Hawaii love him. And I think it's this really interesting dynamic where I think you see a lot of Tennessee Titans fans from Hawaii, which is Tennessee and Hawaii. You don't think of those two states in the same.
Aloha, y'all.
Exactly. You don't think of those things. But I think that's something that's going to drive him in his career. Is I feel like he does feel that he is representing that entire state and that culture. I think that's something that's really important to him that kind of drives his success and that work ethic that we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Okay. I hope that's a good answer. Got one from Austin in Washington, D.C. Okay, this one's to me, so I'll have Brett read it, I guess.
All right. At the real Alex Bode, does Mariota have that killer instinct it takes to succeed as an NFL quarterback?
The killer instinct. I'm a big believer in the killer instinct. That's why I like guys that like a Tom Brady. I'm even surprisingly Eli Manning fan because when he gets in the playoffs, he's pretty spectacular. And I don't know how I've had this question before, and it's a great question. I'm going to start off by talking about Mariota, and then I'm going to talk about Mettenberger, and we'll talk about to finish up what I think. And does Mariota have the killer instinct? I think it was brought up earlier by Brett that he didn't throw a lot of interceptions, didn't have to bounce back a lot, and he never was unclutch. And there's a lot of games where he was clutch. And I think, what year was it against Oregon State?
2013.
2013. I mean, that was one of the clutches. I mean, I'll have Brett give you the play-by-play on that one. I don't ever want to talk about that again. But I'm not sold that he has this killer instinct, but that's mostly because of the soft-spokenness. I see guys, and that doesn't mean they don't have it, but that's uncertain to me. I think that's something that I would like to see. Now, this is the big conundrum I get myself into because I was a guy that said that Mettenberger did have this ferocity, but he was 0-6 as a starter. But then you could also call, he played with 2 undrafted left tackle and right tackle, or Michael Ruse was gone, and Michael Orr had a bad season, and there's injuries everywhere. So I mean, you can't fully blame him, but there's nothing to prove it there either. So the only way I think you can prove this killer instinct is by winning in the NFL. So I mean, for Mariota to prove that he has winning killer instinct will be him making that throw in the playoffs against a better team and overcoming an obstacle. So I mean, I think the key to the killer instinct is that he has to go do it. He can't. It's nothing that we can see yet. And I mean, Oregon won a lot of games, but didn't win the national championship. But I mean, all it's a team sport, and so what you want to see out of Mariota coming in is in the fourth quarter, when the game's on the line, they want him to go get the ball and put the ball into the end zone. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I think there's lots of quarterbacks out there that want the ball. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that don't want the ball. So I mean, he's got to be a guy who wants the ball, who wants to throw a game-winning touchdown.
I think that answer is absolutely fair. I think you could really ask that question about any quarterback that comes out of a premier program, and the fact that a school like Oregon, just like a school like Alabama or Ohio State or Florida State or whoever, they don't play a lot of close games. Marcus Mariota didn't play a lot of fourth quarters in college because
unless you're Jameis Winston and you suck for 3 quarters.
Unless you're Jameis Winston, you keep the other team in it for 3 quarters and then pull it out. Johnny Manziel kind of had a similar thing going. But there were a lot of there were a lot of games where Marcus Mariota didn't play fourth quarter because the score was 50-13. But at the same time, it's hard to knock him on that because it was 50-13 because he'd thrown 5 touchdown passes and run for 2 more. So. And I think that's where any quarterback making that jump from that elite college program, or really any college program, because it's a whole different ball game. It's that whole thing where the best team might have 8 or 9 guys drafted in college. Every team in the NFL has what's roster size, 53?
53, yeah.
So they probably have 50 guys who were drafted in the NFL. So the talent level is different, and you're not playing as many mismatches, and it's very, but at the same time, you talk about that 2013 Oregon State game, rivalry game, gets the ball 2 minutes left.
Tell them to play.
Marches down, throws a touchdown over the middle to Josh Huff, and I don't think he threw an incompletion in that drive. And the guy was MVP of the Fiesta Bowl, MVP of the Rose Bowl, MVP of the Pac-12 championship game. So he has come out and played well in big games against big-time opponents. But again, he also lost twice to Stanford. He lost to Ohio State. I absolutely get that is an issue for a lot of people. But at the same time, a lot of teams lost to those guys, and it's tough to say he doesn't have a killer instinct. But I think you're absolutely right, where that's something that him and any quarterback that gets drafted has to prove they have that in the NFL.
Okay, I think those are fair points on both ends. I think we got some more questions here. I think. Okay, again from Austin in the District of Columbia. This is something I think that we probably both agree on. Is it fair to say Zach Mettenberger is more pro-ready than Mariota is today?
Well, he's played a pro season, so I think it'd be hard to argue against that. But at the same time, you don't necessarily know what Mariota is going to do as far as being pro-ready. I think Mariota certainly is a more talented player if you look at it all around, the legs, the mind, the accuracy. But, obviously he hasn't played a full pro season. Zach Mettenberger has, so it'd be tough to say that Mariota's not more pro-ready for whatever that means.
6 games.
He's got 6 more than Mariota.
Six more than Mariota.
Yeah. I don't know how much of a factor that is when deciding.
Another contention is that he's only played 6 games. I think that's fair. I think this is where you bring up. Let's go worst case scenario on this question.
Mm-hmm. Marcus
Mariota, the Titans go 0-7. At what point is it actually worse for him to stay? Let's say if we're a bad team, what point is it worse for him to stay? We're playing for a bad team, creating bad habits. And at what point is it too much to take him out for confidence reasons? And I think that's something that I hope it doesn't happen, obviously. But if you get to that point, and as Titans fans, we've been there with. We all remember when Kerry Collins led us to 0-6, and then Vince Young came in, and we made a run and went 9-7. And everyone was, Vince Young. And so, I don't anticipate that happening again, because that's the situation when they let Vince Young play behind Kerry Collins. But at what point, if Mariota just is drastically horrible, do they make that decision?
I think that my guess is they don't, because I'm going to point to a guy, obviously he wasn't drafted quite as high. The Oakland Raiders, Derek Carr, sorry. So many cars, they started to keep that straight. Derek Carr with the Oakland Raiders last year. They went, what did they start? 0-10, was it?
Something like that.
They lost a lot of fucking games. And they stuck with Derek Carr, and Derek Carr showed promise, and then they won a few games towards the end of the season, and now everyone's saying, well, Derek Carr, it's a guy that might have some momentum going into next season. So I think, especially the guy who drafted number 2, where you have that, because at the end of the day, if Mariota fails, head coach is fired, all the scouting staff is fired, the GM is fired. A lot of people's jobs are riding on that pick. That's just the nature of a second overall pick. I have a hard time seeing them really benching him at all that season. Even if he's playing poorly, just hoping on having a second half run of something to just give them some momentum into 2016. But that's also a question that really only Ken Wisenhunt and the other powers that be at Tennessee can answer what their threshold for throwing a guy out to the Wolves is. And there's just a lot of factors that it's tough to give a precise answer.
I think that's a fair point. We got a couple more coming in, couple more questions, and I got Damien in Washington D.C. as well, and I think this is to Brett. I don't want to answer this question. But do you think Mariota will be the next Michael Vick or RG3? And I'd probably say none. But
that's just a bullshit question. This is what I hate about like sports analysis these days. Everyone has to be the next somebody. And also, they have to be that somebody that kind of looks like them, too, if you know what I mean. And it's just – the whole thing is just such bullshit because Marcus Mariota is going to be the next Marcus Mariota. He's also going to be the first Marcus Mariota. You know, there's no one like him. There's no one like Zach Mettenberger. Every quarterback is unique. And obviously, there's quarterbacks who are more like each other than not. But to say, is he the next RG3? Well, sure, they have similar skill sets, but they're completely different human beings. B, they're on completely different teams. And C, they have completely different backgrounds coming in. RG3 had torn his ACL twice before he came to Washington, D.C. Mariota had a minor injury issue his sophomore year. Nothing quite on that level. You know, Michael Vick, obviously we all know the problems with Michael Vick. And unless Marcus Mariota is just the best actor in the world, he probably doesn't have those off-the-field issues, right? But at the same time, Michael Vick was a guy that probably had the most talent of anyone ever to play quarterback. So, I mean, I'm not going to throw out a third guy to like compare Mariota to because he's Marcus Mariota. Everyone's ever played quarterback in the NFL has done it in their own way.
I think the best version of Mariota, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is to be like Aaron Rodgers. Is to be
absolutely
like Andrew
absolutely.
Luck. And I think a guy like Aaron Rodgers, we talk about him keeping his eyes downfield, his ability to throw the ball.
And he's a guy that runs for a lot of yards. You look at the stats.
Yeah, so I think all of us would be happy if he was, 75%, 80% the player. Aaron Rodgers is. I got one from Brenda in Oregon. I think we talked about this a little bit, but we're going to address all the questions, obviously. Are the Titans all in on Mariota, or will he get benched if they don't win immediately? I have to say, I think there is a situation where he could be benched. I think it's a situation more or less relying on bad play combined with a nagging injury, which I obviously hope that no one gets injured. But I could see a situation where he has a nagging injury, and with an injury like that, if he's playing poorly, that they'll shut him down for the season. But I mean, I think they all are. I hope they're all in on Mariota because if not, they just did a quick draft pick to extend their careers a couple of years. I'm talking about Wizen had Rustin Webster. We don't even have a CEO right now, but if they just pick Mariota because they can be like it's a growing project and they can have 2 or 3 more years, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. And I hope they're all in for him. And the only way that he loses the job is by literally losing the job, by being awful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And we kind of touched on this. It was a similar question earlier. There's a lot of people who have staked their job, especially when we talk about that potential trade that was kind of discussed, whether or not that happened with the Eagles. If they turn down that trade, and even if they didn't, it's a number 2 overall pick. You swing and miss on that, that's you're getting fired. That's just how the NFL works. And I think for this season at least, it would almost take an injury. You're asking me to get him off the field just because that's just how the NFL works.
I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Brett, but not the same situation happened. But we did go into the season giving Jake Locker a chance, which if you read my blog, I think that was fake. But Locker goes in, he actually plays pretty well.
Okay.
And he gets banged up, and Charlie Whitehurst plays a couple games. And obviously at this point, Mettenberger's knee was not ready to play.
Yep.
Then Locker's coming back. He's actually fully healthy in practice. Mm-hmm. And Wizenet comes out on the podium. I think we all remember this and goes, Mettenberger's starting next game. And everyone goes, what? Okay. But the reason that we all thought he did that was because we thought Mettenberger was his guy. And Locker, if you remember in the Cleveland Browns, I'm not trying to get too crazy into the past, but in the Cleveland Browns game, the Titans go up big and actually end up blowing the game.
Remember that game?
After a Jake Locker injury. Poor Jake Locker, I hope he is doing well now. But they blow the game after Locker had ran and done a lot of things outside the pocket. And then after, I think remember this, after the game, they talked to Jake Locker about him running the football and being Jake Locker, like we've seen in Pac-12 games and in the NFL. And Wizenet said that wasn't part of the game plan. And Jake Locker said, well, he just had to be more like himself. And I hope the reason that they're all in for Mariota is they don't have that same cop-out, because if they're going to go, well, Mariota's using his skill sets that don't fit how we think, I think that's a detriment to his career in general.
One thing I think the buy-in you see with turning down that rumored trade that I think we all agree, even if that wasn't the exact trade, I think we all agree there were trades out there for Mariota too, plus there were other talented players. I think that buy-in, you can't really use that excuse. I think if they weren't set on that skill set, they just wouldn't have drafted him. Two, like, again, Oregon fan, big Pac-12 guy, a lot of experience with Jake Locker. Obviously played for our arch rivals, the Washington Huskies. Led them to 0-12 season his sophomore year, actually, but that's neither here nor there. I think completely different player, Jake Locker. Jake Locker was always a guy with a ton of natural talent. He had probably a bigger arm than Mariota. Not quite as fast, but again, very fast guy, physical runner.
Yeah.
But just he also just had never put that together on a football field, either in college or the pros, obviously. So I think you're looking at like a very different guy where he was picked more as like a project. Well, Mariota obviously he's still a project. He's, the whole like pro readiness, whatever that means, maybe isn't there as much as some other quarterbacks. But he's a guy that has gone out and played better than anyone else in the country last year. And really, if you look at his past 3 years of stats, had arguably the best career ever for quarterback in college, certainly, in that discussion. And I think it's just night and day from what Jake Locker was coming into Tennessee versus what Mariota is.
Yeah. There's a case there, because if your coach likes somebody, he likes somebody. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I mean, that's how it is. I got 3 more questions here. Do you have any? How many do you have left?
I have one question that's come in. So how about you give one, I'll give mine, then you give our next 2. We'll see if anyone else tweets in.
I think this is a very fair point, something we haven't talked about at all. From Michael, Mariota wasn't hit a lot in college. Do you think he can stay healthy against NFL defenses? And before I let you get into this, I think this is a big issue, especially in Tennessee. I think we saw with Locker's multiple injuries, Whitehurst injuries, and then finally Mettenberger being hurt, getting back up and playing, and eventually getting knocked out of the season. That's all 3 quarterbacks on the roster being out because of our lack of an offensive line. And I think that it's fair to question Mariota's lack of experience with getting hit, because I mean, if Chip Kelly was coaching the Eagles, like I think he will do with Sam Bradford, I don't think Mariota would get hit very often. I think Chip Kelly knows a guy like that. And no discredit to Whisenhunt, but he likes his quarterbacks to stay in the pocket and hold on to the ball, like a Ben Roethlisberger, like Kurt Warner did in their Super Bowl. So what do we say about that? He's a slender guy.
I think you break it down into a few parts. First of all, I think the assertion that he wasn't hit in college isn't really true. I think, if you followed the Oregon football team last year, we just got devastated with offensive line injuries, especially early in the season, where at one point in the game against Arizona, where we ended up losing, we had in the game we lost against Arizona, we had both starting tackles out and a starting guard out. Our starting center missed 4 games. And if you watched Oregon, actually the last 2 seasons, we had these offensive line injuries, and offensive line has never necessarily been a strength of Oregon. He's been hit a lot. I think at one point last season, about halfway through the season, he was the most sacked quarterback in the country, or certainly in the top 5. And so, obviously that's a concern. It's a concern for every quarterback. There's a reason why left tackle outside of quarterback is the most important position in the game. And that's because, you have to keep your quarterback upright. And there's been very few quarterbacks who can't succeed without a good offensive line. And that's, that's the next step for Tennessee. Is obviously you say quarterback, offensive line, quarterback. It's kind of chicken before the egg type situation, which came first. But I think, one, he's been hit a lot. 2, he's a big guy. He's bigger than RG3. He's 6'4". I think, what did he weigh in? About 225?
Yeah, 225, something like that.
Yeah.
He looks slender.
He looks slender, but I think
deceiving.
I think that's part just because he's so tall. He's closer to – he's about the same size as Colin Kaepernick, who's a guy who hasn't really had any injury issues. But again, you never know when a guy's ACL is going to snap, and that's certainly an issue. I think that's an issue for any quarterback that gets drafted by a weak team. But I don't think it's necessarily more of an issue for him because, again, I think he has had a lot of experience of getting pressured in college.
I think Brett has a question here, and then these last 2 all combine into one question. And we've actually gone longer than I thought we were going to go, but thanks for sticking with us. And if you're watching this tomorrow or whenever it is, thanks for watching the video. But I'll let Brett go into these questions here, and I'll combine these last 2, and we'll get out of here.
I have a question from Alex in Denver, Colorado, at SkiKing777, if you want to follow him on Twitter. He wants to know whether who can play the piano better, Joey Harrington or Marcus Mariota? So that was a lot of Tennessee people out here. I got to give you some context for this. Joey Harrington was our quarterback in the late 90s, early 2000s. Led us to a Pac-12 championship, #2 final ranking, and also was a Heisman finalist. Probably after Mariota, the second best quarterback in Oregon history. He's also a concert pianist. Drafted #3 overall by the Detroit Lions. He had a very Detroit Lions type career. And didn't have Calvin Johnson to throw to, unfortunately. And I think he is probably a safe bet to say that he was a better pianist than Marcus Mariota. I don't know. I've never heard Marcus play the piano, but Joe Harrington was renowned for his piano playing abilities. But it didn't really help him in the NFL, so maybe that's a good thing that Marcus can't really twinkle the ivories, as they say.
All right, so we're gonna go the quick hit round here with these last 2 questions. I'll let Brett go first, and then he can ask me the exact same questions, and I will answer in the same way. Let's do this. And first thing that comes to mind, a Mariota offense will blank in 2015.
Be improved. I think it'll be inconsistent but improved. I think
Inconsistent but improved. Okay.
I think you'll have games where they struggle to move the ball. But I think you guys had some games like that last year. I think you'll have other games where you'd be like, wow, everything just clicked that game. We won the game, put up 35 points. So, again, I don't necessarily know a ton about what Tennessee has coming in. I'm not a Tennessee Titans fan. I haven't watched them.
Well, not yet, anyway.
I'm sure, yeah. I'm sure I'll watch them a lot more this year with Mariota being on the team. But I think that I think you'll see improvement. I think you'll see excitement. I think you'll still see plays that you're like, wow, that was fun to watch.
Okay, and then I'll give you these questions first, and then we'll do the same thing back to me. Stat predictions for the year on Mariota: yards, completions, attempts, rushing yards, TDs, interceptions. I think you, as best as you can remember those things, go as fast as you can.
Okay, yards. I'm going to say passing yards. They play 16 games in the NFL. 3,400 passing yards.
That'd be huge.
I think about 3,400 passing yards, about 600 rushing yards, total touchdowns between rushing and passing. That's a tough one. That's such a team stat. Let's say 20 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 7 rushing touchdowns.
And then just completion percentage.
Gosh,
can he be above 55 guy? I think he was in college.
I think he absolutely. He was like a 70% guy in college. Obviously, it's a completely different ball game. I think he can be. I think he'll be right around that number this year. I think you'll see that moving up as it goes along. It also kind of depends on how they play, whether or not they give him kind of those give him the rhythm, little 5-yard dink and dunk type passes, which I think they will. Because I think that's a smart thing to do with a young quarterback is give him some confidence, build some confidence with easy throws. So I think you'll see a lot of that.
All right, hit me with the same.
All right. So stat predictions, yards.
I don't think 3,400. I'll go. Unfortunately, I think he won't play 16 games not because of him, because no Tennessee Titan quarterback has played 16 games in a long time. I'm going to say 2,800 yards. Probably, I'd be in the 500 to 600 rush yards. That'd be impressive to say the least. I can get behind the 20 touchdowns. I think the picks will be a little higher. I think 8 would be really impressive. I think he's going to be more in the teens, 13 per picks, I'll say. Fumbling, I don't know. I don't know how much he fumbled in college, really, but I don't think that would be a huge problem in his game. Completion percentage, I think it's going to be probably sub 55, and that'll be weird for him for the first time in his career. And then what am I missing? Rushing touchdowns.
Rushing touchdowns.
I'd give him. I think we should use him in the red zone for that. So I'll give him 7 rushing touchdowns.
Okay.
And then what's the other question?
Mariota offense will blank in 2015.
Mariota offense will. I think a Mariota offense will struggle early on, and hopefully improve by the end of the year. Do we have another question? Okay, I guess we have one more. I skipped over one. Just for fun, before we get out of here, why will Mariota succeed after what we've seen from so many straight quarterbacks, including the imploding Robert Griffin III?
Again, I think that's another bullshit question. I think we've seen a lot of pro-style quarterbacks fail in the NFL. I don't think there's been a more talented guy than Mariota come out, except for maybe Cam Newton, who I don't think quite has the mental talent that Mariota has. Obviously, he's got some kind of sketchy things in the past at the University of Florida. But I mean, I think to say that like so many spread quarterbacks, I think it's a small sample size, and there have been some very successful spread quarterbacks out there. But I think he'll succeed because I don't think there's been a better pocket passer who has come from a spread offense in a long time. So that would be my answer.
Okay. I think that pretty much wraps up what we wanted to get through today, and I hope that watching this today or this week is going to enjoy the show. He's Brett Field. You can follow him at Real Brett Field. I'm Alex Bodingheimer. You can follow me at the Real Alex Bode. This has been the Real Tennessee Titans blog first live stream. So we hope to do better at this in the future. Hope this was fun for you guys. We're gonna drink beers and talk about as much sports as we can. And I mean, I'm sure we'll have Brett come back on the show eventually, talk about Mariota again. Hopefully, for his sake, it'll be oozing his praises about how I was wrong about Mettenberger.
Hopefully, for all your sake,
he was right on Mariota.
You guys are fans of the Titans,
So anyway, he'll be a Titans fan by next time around the show, I'm sure. But it's been good having you, and hope the Titans have a great offseason and a good year this year. Thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna turn it off here.